Hello and welcome to CNBC TV 18. I'm Shireen Bhan. On today's special, we turn our attention to India's clean energy transition, the current landscape as well as the road ahead. The government has stated its intent to reduce the country's emission intensity as well as significantly increase installed power capacity from renewable energy sources by the end of this decade. Near-term targets are also ambitious. For example, the promise to provide 24/7 power to all households by 2022 and install 175 gigawatts of new renewable energy with a plan to expand to 450 gigawatts by 2030. In its latest report on self-reliance for renewable energy manufacturing, CII attempts to provide a roadmap for India to emerge as a global manufacturing hub for renewable energy. While the report commends attractive manufacturing schemes like the domestic content requirement, the phased local manufacturing plan for solar and production-linked incentive schemes for battery manufacturing, among others, many bottlenecks remain. Prominently, the alignment of the centre's policies with those of the states and, of course, the perpetual problem of discoms. Let's take this conversation forward with our very special panel of guests. I'm joined by Ramesh Nair, the member of the CII National Council for Renewable Energy, Sameer Gupta, chairman of the CII National Committee on Renewable Energy Manufacturing, Tulsi Tanti, chairman of the CII Renewable Energy Council, Praveer Sinha, the co-chairman of CII's National Committee on Power, and Jaidev Galla, the vice chairman and managing director of Amara Raja Batteries. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Mr. Sinha, let me start by asking you, while we have put together, as I pointed out at the start of the program, many ambitious targets as far as where we want to be in terms of renewable energy, there is still a big distance between the target and the installed capacity. Not to take away from the fact that we have made significant gains in the last few years, especially as far as renewable power generation capacity is concerned, a CAGR growth of about 17% from FY16 to where we are currently. But if I were to ask you about the transition plan and the key bottlenecks that continue to hold the sector back, how would you like to open?
Thank you, Shireen, to have me for the show. You rightly mentioned that India has a very ambitious plan, 175 gigawatt, which was for 2022, and then 450 gigawatt by 2030. And there is a demand. In fact, it's a given fact that renewable energy will play a very, very important role in future for capacity additions and meeting the power requirement. However, there is a structural change that has to be done, and that is, how do you create the demand? How do you create enough of consumption of the renewable energy, and especially in terms of the way the growth of the country is happening. And the challenge before us is that the distribution reforms have still not happened. And until and unless the structural change takes place and the demand is generated, because what we have seen is that India has grown. Today, we are 95 gigawatt of generation capacity in renewables. And going forward, more and more capacity, if it has to be added, there has to be a way in which these discoms are in a position to purchase power and pay for it. This is a challenge, and I think that's the place where the big ticket change or the reform has to happen. I understand that the electricity amendment will happen possibly in the monsoon session, but this is a very, very big necessity if we have to reach the aspiration which the government has set for itself, and I think Prime Minister is very keen to drive this number.
Yeah. On that important point, and thank you for starting on the most crucial issue, which is really what has been ailing the power sector, not just the renewable energy sector, but the power sector in general. So how hopeful do you feel, Dr. Sinha, about this latest set of reforms for the power sector, this 3.03 lakh crore rupees that was approved for discoms, over a period of 5 years? More importantly, do you believe that we could perhaps now see a takeoff as far as privatization of discoms is concerned, or at best, at least a de-licensing of discoms under the new electricity reforms?
I think both of them are very important for the immediate future. The 3 lakh crore scheme is a very, very important scheme, and that will help the discoms to improve their financial capability and also help them to have enough money for carrying out some of the new technology initiatives, such as the smart metering and the SCADA system and the grid optimization that has to take place. But what is required is the structural reform, which will only happen if the tariff policy and the Electricity Act amendment takes place. Because fundamentally, now we have enough generation capacity, and the Indian private sector and public sector have demonstrated that they can set up large plants and can also operate them efficiently. What is important is in the distribution system, where we need to bring reforms so that these distribution companies become financially viable. And that's the challenge that we have, because if we have to have that much capacity getting into the grid, then there has to be someone who should be in a position to buy that power and pay. And I strongly believe that the government of the day is very much poised to bring about these reforms and these changes. And along with that, the regulatory changes that needs to happen in terms of ensuring that the tariffs are cost reflective and decisions on tariff related issues and other commercial issues are taken quickly. So my sense is that if we have to move forward, bring these structural changes, the schemes, there have been many, and many have been successful, many have been partially successful. But more than the scheme is the structural reform or the structural change that is required.
And you know, this is not new. We've been talking about the need for this structural change that you speak of for many, many, many years now. But let me bring Mr. Nair into the conversation. Mr. Nair, many thanks for joining us. Let's talk about what's happening on the solar side. The target is 280 gigawatts. We've got what currently installed about 41 gigawatts. Of course, this has been something that we have seen grow significantly in the last few years. What we just heard there from Mr. Sinha in terms of being able to drive consumption, demand, in terms of the economics now working out as far as aiding consumption is concerned. What are the big changes that reflect the landscape as we currently see it today? And more importantly, what would you prioritize as the changes required moving forward?
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you for having me over. And as you rightly said, the country has done about 40 gigawatts of solar capacity at this point of time, and we have a very ambitious target as part of the Atmanirbhar program of the Honorable Prime Minister for touching about 300 gigawatts by 2030. And obviously, this is it definitely looks like a steep target. And when you look at analyzed numbers, we're talking about something like about 25 gigawatts per annum you'll have to sort of install. And for that, as a country, we have a huge challenge before us. And rightfully so, the government and the MNRE, the Minister of Power and the Honorable Prime Minister has recognized the fact that we need manufacturing in this country, and the push thereby to get the supply chain right, to get the manufacturing into the country and make it available to the developers to in their journey to develop the huge target that we have in front of us through the various schemes that we have. I think that's the real priority in manufacturing today. Just imagine that if we had to import this whole manufacturing piece of 300 gigawatt of 25 gigawatts per annum, we are talking about something like about $5 billion drain on the exchequer in terms of forex. And this is something you stem fundamentally through manufacturing focus. And then obviously the various, the generation of employment, the economic churn that happens through the whole ecosystem that we have put in. For example, in Adani, we have a full ecosystem in our EMC, which comprises of the complete ancillaries that is required for solar manufacturing. And as you're rightly aware, the GDP of the country in terms of manufacturing is about 15% of GDP is manufacturing. And obviously this has to go up to something like about 30% if you have to be in line with the world majors. And this is one big push that the government of India has given. I think in solar, this is absolutely right at the right time. And this is one big focus that we need to have, and I think is rightfully in place at this point of time.
But let me ask you this, Mr. Nair. You know, you talked about the need to boost manufacturing because clearly the import bill, if you were to be able to reach the kind of targets that the government has set out, is going to be enormous. But in terms of the solar module manufacturing PLI at about 4,500 crore rupees, which has been approved by the government, is this enough? And what more, if anything, is needed?
If you look at the manufacturing landscape in this country, we have something like about 10 to 12 gigawatts of module manufacturing at this point of time, and about 4 gigawatts of cell manufacturing at this point of time. The new PLI scheme, as it envisages, would bring in at least about 10 to 15 gigawatts of integrated manufacturing at various levels of integration. While this is sufficient at this point of time, but I would say as we go forward, the PLI scheme could be expanded a little more and to have more players come in, and there's nothing wrong in it, and the country would have the capacity to absorb it. Because obviously there's a lot of demand that is there in place, and the future demand looks very bright for the country with the kind of push, with the 5 trillion economy push that the Prime Minister has given. Obviously there is space for everybody to and more to be in the manufacturing landscape.
Yes, every industry wants more, but at least as far as solar is concerned, there already is a PLI scheme that the government has cleared. But let me go across to Mr. Tanti. Mr. Tanti, let's move now from solar to talk about offshore wind. And this is also one area of opportunity that many companies like NTPC and others are betting on. Explain to me what the key drivers are, how the landscape has actually changed in the last few years, and what you feel most confident about as you look ahead.
As you know, the wind sector is, I think, quite matured in the country, and more than 10,000 megawatt manufacturing capacity, plus almost 90% domestic supply chain. And even this year, we see the compared to domestic sales from India, the export sales will be higher, the first time in last so many years. So it is a good move, the maturity of the sectors. Now, what should be the next in the wind sector is important, the bigger and larger size of the turbine to increase the plant load factor so that we can add more value additions to the applications of the energy, not just to generate the power, but to add the value added like green hydrogen, green ammonia, desalination plant, going forward electrical vehicle purpose point of view, because the higher the plant load factor is more beneficial to that, because then same time we can reduce lot our import content and everything. As far as the offshore, we have a huge potentiality and capacities in the country is available because we are surrounded by the sea, and most of our energy consumption loads and capacities are closer to the coastal side. So it's a win-win situation. But still it is has to go a long way because it's required a lot of good infrastructure setups, and the cost of energy from the offshore is quite expensive. So the government frameworks are required to support their VGF scheme of some incentive programs. Initially, once the supply chain and setups can be established, then offshore can able to take. But onshore sites, more than 200 gigawatts opportunity is there, and the combination of wind and solar, we can see it can add a lot of capacity in the domestic land. I think that's a good opportunity for the wind sector.
Right. Just in terms of the manufacturing boost, I want to understand from you what continue to be the key constraints. Commodity costs have increased significantly. How much of a challenge is that? How much of a challenge is financing at this point in time? And also, I know that one of the recommendations that CII has put forward to the government is the need to have dedicated manufacturing zones. Have you heard back on what the plan is there?
No, it's required a big level of some of the ecosystems and cluster establishment for the manufacturing capacity. And this sector is contributing a lot for MSME. Today, we have 4,000 SME companies are producing the components and services for the wind sectors. So there is a good opportunity. And some of the geographic locations are more value added, and ecosystems are there if we can expand. The best part is we can see the way China has established solar as a global manufacturing hub. We have a great opportunity and windows are open for the global wind sector manufacturing hub in the country. So that is the best part we can leverage. And today strategically really good opportunity because world is interested to manufacture the wind turbines in India. You will be surprised, in 2020, the world is passing through the pandemic cycles and other things. During that time, the wind sector globally has grown by 30%. So that shows the priority of the wind sector is increasing too much in the globally, irrespective of lockdown period. And this is the opportunity India we can leverage by establishing some of the good clusters in some of the geographic initiatives. I think we can able to make a lot good exports from this sector.
everyone is talking about the EV opportunity. Take me through where we currently are. How do you see demand panning out? What does it mean eventually in terms of costs?
Hi, Shireen. Thank you. It's good that you actually started out talking about EVs, because in the battery space, that's very important. When we look at the demand for lithium-ion batteries globally, it tends to be 80% from EV application and about another 20% from energy and renewable energy space. So if you have to really build large gigafactories at the scale that are being built across the world today, especially in North America and Europe and in Korea and China, you have to be looking at 20 gigawatt hours or 50 gigawatt hour type of size to be at that scale. And to drive that kind of volume, you have to have demand from EV. So in India, if you look at the India story, today the EV penetration is growing in the two-wheeler space and the three-wheeler space, which we think, has reached a certain cost parity to the IC engine vehicles. So there should be good penetration in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler space, which is a very different pattern to what we're seeing in other parts of the world. When is the cost parity and when will the demand come up for four-wheeler passenger cars and for trucks and other types of vehicles is still not very clear. And we're far behind as far as penetration in those segments. So at this time, for the government to come in with this PLI scheme is very opportune, because companies that were looking to invest in this space, but because of demand, lack of demand in the EV space that we've held back till now, we are now able to think about it, because with these incentives, we can still be somewhat competitive with even a smaller size plant compared to some of the global manufacturers, and be able to at least start serving the renewable energy segment in India, and also the budding EV sector will have that that chicken and egg situation. Will car manufacturers add capacity or battery manufacturers add capacity first? Will could be possibly solved with this PLI scheme. So we're looking forward to that.
So Jaidev, I want to take that point forward with you. So what are we talking about then in terms of capex, at least for a company like yours, given the opportunity that you foresee? Where are we likely to see battery costs headed? Because that makes up the lion's share of the cost of an electric vehicle. So where are we likely to see battery costs headed, especially with the move towards domestic manufacturing?
So you're right, in passenger cars, battery accounts for about 40% of the cost of the vehicle, but in two-wheeler and three-wheeler, it's a much smaller percentage. Just that clarification first. But the costs will come down because of two reasons. One is increasing capacity and increasing economies of scale because of manufacturing processes becoming more efficient at higher scale, and also from technology improvements that will be ongoing. So we see that we would be looking at fairly good savings over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the cost of the battery. But the big question mark is going to be on the supply chain and the materials. What's going to happen with the cost of materials? If the demand really takes off and the materials are limited, the other improvements could maybe get not offset by increase in material costs. So availability of lithium, availability of cobalt, availability of various materials that today is still we don't have a secure supply chain to all of those materials as far as India is concerned, is going to be a limiting factor.
Yes, that will be a limiting factor. You didn't respond to my question on the kind of investment plan that you have put in place, but I'll come back to you in just a second. Go ahead, Jaidev.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we've gone on record, so I think I can share it with all of you that we're actually looking at now moving from a battery company into more of an energy and mobility company with these investments into lithium that we're planning. And we intend to look at establishing about 10 gigawatt hours of capacity over the next 5 to 10 years. And we expect that, things may change, but at current estimates, that would be over about $1 billion of investment is what we expect to get to that 10 gigawatt
Well, $1 billion in investments to get to that target of 10 gigawatt hours. But let me get Samir into the conversation. Samir, we were talking about some of the bottlenecks, and many of those have already been raised here, whether it's the cancellation of tenders or PPA negotiations, land availability, clearances, and so on and so forth. What are the key recommendations that you would like the government to prioritize? Because not everything that has been listed out by CII is likely to go through. So what are the key priorities that you want the government to act on?
Thank you, Shireen. I think if I were to pick top 3 or 4 out of the host of recommendations that we are trying to make, I would say, focus on promoting alternate renewable technologies, particularly say hydrogen. Currently, PLI does not cover hydrogen, and I think hydrogen is going to play a very big role in times to come. We just heard about supply chain challenges, particularly on batteries, lithium, and cobalt. But hydrogen is one thing which can actually contribute to India becoming truly self-reliant. And with the cost of solar coming down, I think opportunities around hydrogen are going to truly unlock. There could be huge opportunities for manufacturing electrolyzers or fuel cells or storage of hydrogen or transportation of hydrogen. Also manufacturing hydrogen, green hydrogen itself. So if there could be some focus and around this, we heard our Honorable Finance Minister during the last budget session on having a national hydrogen policy. If that can be carefully crafted, which is implementable, I think it's going to do a lot of good to our country. Secondly, I would say the way awareness of climate change is coming in and the fact that literally every country, every nation around the world is talking about reaching net zero emissions by 2050, I think there could be a mandate for industries to have some portion of energy, of power, which should be renewable. They should use some energy as the renewable energy. It could be 20% to begin with, or whatever the right percentage could be. I think that could be the second key recommendation. And thirdly, since we are making every possible effort to position ourselves as a global manufacturing hub, there got to be export incentives, and there are recommendations we are trying to make around those as well. Particularly remission of duties and taxes on export products. I think these three key, duties. Particularly these three, I think recommendations will do a lot of good to the sector besides all the recommendations that we have made.
So export incentives, mandatory use of renewable energy, especially I would imagine as far as industrial clients are concerned, some of the recommendations that CII is putting forth. Mr. Nair, Mr. Sinha and Mr. Tanti, I want to address the issue of tariffs, and we've seen a declining trend. I think we're now at a record low of about ₹99 per unit in terms of solar and ₹2.43 in terms of wind. Mr. Nair, let me start by asking you, how much lower are we likely to see tariffs fall? How do you see the trend?
I think my sense is that we have hit quite a low level at this point of time, and we'll have to see how it goes as it go forward, if it is sustainable or not, this kind of tariffs. But yes, of course, this is a tariff as long as this tariff
is it sustainable, Mr. Nair? At a ₹99, is it sustainable?
See, in this world of technology and in this world of energy, there's nothing that is not sustainable at this point of time. I don't want to make a blanket comment on it. Obviously, if the price of raw material falls, the price of the end product falls, the price of solar panels, wind energy falls, this could be something sustainable. But at this point of time, with the current pricing that we see in the market, it looks like a little bit of a tough numbers to hold on. And we do not see these numbers to be seen in the near future for some time at least, the kind of pricing that we had seen.
Okay, so you're politely saying that this looks a little unsustainable at this point in time. Mr. Sinha, what do you make of the declining tariff trend and the trajectory that we're on?
Well, the tariff has reduced over a period of time, but then there have been few changes which have happened. The basic customs duty will be implemented from 1st of April. both on cell and modules. So for solar projects, definitely the tariff will go up. Also, what we need to see is that what is the moderated level of tariff. We have the extreme of, under certain conditions, it came down to 199. One has to consider what is the cost of the land, what is the evacuation arrangement, and where exactly this project is being set up. So I don't think one can make a standard statement and say that it will be only 2 rupees, but different locations, different conditions on the bids will determine the tariff. But one thing is for certain, that more and more efficiency is coming in the production cost, more and more efficiency is coming in the modules, new technologies are coming into modules, and with more manufacturing that will come up in the country, these costs will keep on coming down. So whether it will be 2 rupees or maybe after 2 years lesser than that, we'll have to see how the ecosystem develops and what sort of taxation policies are there. If suppose the GST is given for electricity sector, the tariff can come down come down from the present level also. So I think it has a combination of policies, regulations, and the business ecosystem that is developed, and that will help us to give better quality service and lower cost power to the consumers of the country.
You know, if I look at what Mr. Sinha is saying, and Mr. Tanti, let me get you to comment on that, that given the, advantages with the uptake of technology, more efficiency, as well as a more favorable regulatory environment, the hope is that this declining trend as far as tariffs are concerned is likely to not just continue, but also be sustainable.
Near term, it's not sustainable, honestly, because the volume currently capacity utilization of the country is less, and same time we are transformation phase to bring the new technology. Some initial capex investment and other thing is required, huge, and also the import content is reducing and domestic content. So certain cost initially it will go. So near term answer is it will not sustain. Going forward, when the volume will increase and domestic manufacturing will increase and ecosystem establish, wind and solar both, I think then it should be a level playing field will come perfectly, and then it will be the tariff stability will come.
Okay, let me get wrap-up comments from each of you, and Jaidev Gala, let me ask you, one of the suggestions made by CII in its report is also that there be more alignment of policies at the central government level as well as state levels. As someone who is dealing with both, what are the points of misalignment that you would like rectified at this point in time? And outside of electric vehicles, which you spoke of as the big area of opportunity, what could be potential growth areas for you in the future?
Thanks, Shireen. Let me take the second part first. It's easier to deal with, I think, than about the governments. Right now, I think one thing that needs clarity is what is going to be the policy on storage, because as a battery company and a storage battery company, when will renewable energy generating capacity start adding storage to the mix? Because there's a policy that it should be at about 10% of the total capacity, which has largely not been implemented. It's not mandatory. But as we go from an energy mix of now, 36% being renewable energy to, 62% in 2030, I think storage is going to be much more important. So when are we going to actually start adding storage is a question to, the renewable energy industry and the government in general, because I think that's going to be important to provide grid stability for ancillary services and even for the 24/7 power that's being envisaged. Storage is going to be very important. Now, all storage isn't just battery. There's different types of storage, but there has to be a mix of that also brought into the plans. So that's something that is missing, I think, in policy. As far as integration, the policies between state governments and central government, I think that's a very big question. I don't think it's easy to generalize every state as being the same and all problems being the same. And I think that would require another
Sure.
program to get into. So I would probably avoid oil.
You're absolutely right. It will require another program, and we don't have enough time on this one to be able to address that. But I'll bring all of you back again to address that issue. But let me get wrap-up comments from each of you. Mr. Nair, near term, the targets that you've set as far as your company is concerned specifically.
Near term, basically, we are actually expanding our business to about 3.5 gigawatts of solar manufacturing capacity, and we are looking at the future very optimistic on this sector, and we feel solar has a very bright future with the resurgent demand, and even in the environment of hydrogen, you need solar at the end of the day to sort of finally electrolyze hydrogen and generate green hydrogen. So it's an area of tremendous opportunity, and we look forward to the future with great optimism.
Mr. Sinha, we're going to close with you. The near-term targets that you've set for yourself.
We are looking at 15 gigawatt of renewables, which is solar, wind, and storage, so that we can make this firm power 24/7 power. We are also looking at enhancing our manufacturing capacity from 1 gigawatt at present to something like 3 gigawatt. And we are looking at expanding our rooftop solar and the solar pump business so that the distributed generation also picks up speed. So definitely huge plans for our growth in renewable space.
Well, gentlemen, we wish you the very best of luck. Thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18 to take us through the roadmap for this big energy transition that the country has embarked on. There is a gap between what is projected and what is the current situation. But on the back of the recommendations that have come in from the panel, hopefully if policymakers and governments were to act on those, perhaps the gap and the distance will shrink as we move forward. Ramesh Nair, Samir Gupta, Praveer Sinha, Tulsi Tanti, Jaydev Galla, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.